Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. Taking a look at this Nebraska Cornhuskers football team as we roll into spring practice. Just kind of naming a couple positions, position battles, I should say, that we're keeping an eye on under Matt Rhule era again. This is a Nebraska team we talk about a lot. We were out there for a game a couple years ago. Some of the, when you think about college football and why it's so special, the only evidence you really need is just pointing at a fan base like Nebraska. Phenomenal fans, extremely passionate about that sport, about their team. So again, before we even get into it, I just want to say thank you to you guys. You guys have been awesome with the support. We love chopping it up in the comment section with you guys about the Cornhuskers. So again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And then more importantly, let us know some players that you're keeping an eye on as spring practice gets on their way. And without further ado, Dill, I'm going to kick it to you. Let's talk about with the most obvious position in position battle we could talk about, and that's the quarterback position between Casey Thompson, the incumbent starter, and then Jeff Sims, the super talented transfer coming from Georgia Tech.
And this is honestly kind of an interesting one. When Jeff Sims announced that he was going to Nebraska, I thought for sure that meant Casey Thompson was out because, again, this is Casey Thompson, sixth year now in college? I can't imagine he's got to want to start. I think he's on the fringe of possibly getting a look at the pros. I don't think he's a surefire by any means, but you got to look at it, or he might get a look. So the fact that he's going to be there and ready to battle, I think is going to be really interesting. I guess my initial lean is just new era, new quarterback. Again, I don't blame much of what happened last year in Casey Thompson. I honestly thought he was one of their better players, but at the end of the day, they still were really, really bad. And I got to think almost Matt Rhule is just like, all right, let's bring in a new era. Let's bring in Jeff Sims and let's kind of change what's going on.
And I think Casey Thompson is a very talented quarterback, but I do think it's hard to argue that he's more talented than Jeff Sims. And obviously, Jeff Sims coming over from Georgia Tech, it's really hard to thrive in that environment. I mean, Georgia Tech is in the bottom of the barrel of the ACC. But I remember watching Jeff Sims and Jahmyr Gibbs as true freshmen at Georgia Tech. And you look at Jeff Sims' number. He played a lot of football as a true freshman, almost threw for 2,000 yards, also rushed for 500 yards. This dude can get it done with his legs, and he also has a very big arm. He's 6'3", 220 pounds, and when you look at this battle and how it's shaping out heading into spring practice, Casey Thompson, from what I'm hearing, isn't going to be playing at all during spring practice. So you have a new coach in Matt Rhule. You have a new OC in Marcus Satterfield. There's no one who has an edge, and if there's anybody who does have an edge, it's Jeff Sims, who's going to be able to take most of the quarterback one reps during spring practice.
And that was Matt Rhule's guy. I mean, he obviously was like the first big transfer.
Yes.
And that makes me think Matt Rhule kind of was familiar with the game pretty early and was starting to build all right, this is going to be my guy. This is going to be who I kind of go into battle with as I enter this Nebraska era.
Also a guy with 2 more years of eligibility. I mean, he got that COVID year for free, and he didn't redshirt. So you're getting a guy with 3 years of experience, but also 2 more years of eligibility because you get that free redshirt year.
And no monster quarterback in the recruiting class for Nebraska yet. So it's you might want a guy who can stick around for a little bit and be your guy for, a little longer than with Casey Thompson, obviously.
No monster recruiting quarterback yet in this
2024 class. No, I mean, that's what I mean.
The ROC Boys channel is bringing Dylan Rhule home. That's our motto for the offseason. We're bringing this kid. He loves Nebraska. Yeah. That's for another day. Go check out our video on Dylan Rhule if you're interested in that. But more importantly, whatever quarterback gets to start, this offensive line needs to be better. And you look at some of the guys they got. This is the position group that you want to see make the biggest jumps. They have recruited the position well under Scott Frost. They have good players. They have Ben Scott coming in from Arizona State. You got to see some development because whatever quarterback is taking quarterback 1 snaps week 1, Marcus Satterfield is going to want to run the football. 2 tight ends. They want to be physical. They're going to huddle. That's only going to be successful if this offensive line can get it going a little bit more than it did.
You got to think, again, you just got to think they're going to be able to develop these guys a little bit more consistently under the Matt Rhule era because that's Matt Rhule's calling card. He's been a guy, he's not really an ace recruiter.
No.
Granted, I think he could be at Nebraska because that's a different animal, especially under the new NIL rules. But he's a guy who develops guys really well. And you've got a lot of guys have played a lot of football on this Nebraska offensive line. you just maybe haven't quite seen them take the jump. I mean, Teddy Prohaska feels like a guy who should be a pro. He's got the body, he's got the athleticism, he's got the look about him. You just got to put him in a position and make him better and do what coaches are supposed to do. And man, if you make this offensive line make a jump, you could be really tough, I think, because the skills are honestly pretty good, led by Anthony Grant.
Yeah, and you look at like guys like Turner Cochran, like former top 50 dude nationally coming out of high school. It's talent. And I think you mentioned it best. Like Matt Rhule never really cut his teeth on being an ace recruiter, getting the best talent. You look at Temple, he was never able to bring in a ton of talent. What he did was develop players and put them in spots where they can be successful. He did the same thing at Baylor. Like that was a team that was recruiting not very well in comparison to other Big 12 schools, yet was beating almost all the Big 12 schools before he took the job in Carolina. He's an ace at developing talent and putting guys in spots where they can be successful. That's the biggest challenge that he has facing him, is getting this offensive line back to what you're seeing with Nebraska football. Big, physical offensive line, and that's what they're going to with hiring a guy like Marcus Satterfield. Now, looking at the pass catchers, just like a name in spring practice, or at least heading into summer, that you're getting real excited about here.
Malachi Coleman. I mean, at the end of the day,
I don't think he's early enrollee though, but he is a guy to watch.
He's a wide receiver. Like these wide receivers, they come in. If you're a freak athlete and you catch the football, you can be a problem immediately. And I look at this team; they were so heavily dependent on what Trey Palmer was doing. I think Marcus Washington, you maybe think he can be a 1. I think he's more of a 2. I think Billy Kemp is a little bit more of a role player in an offense. Yes. I think at the end of the day, the guy with the true big dog talent, like number 1 pick or first round talent, it's Malachi Coleman. And again, I think that's a perfect position to be a young player because these young guys play really well at wide receiver typically.
And man, I mean, if there's a recruit that's just picked up more and more steam as the 2023 class came to a close, like freakish wheels for a guy that big. He's got great size. I can't wait to see what they do with him. I mean, coming in as an athlete, I would be very surprised if he's not getting touches early and often for his career, because you look at difference makers. We didn't touch on Anthony Grant. He's a stud. He's one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. Honestly, not really to talk about. Malachi Coleman's the guy who he could be the Trey Palmer of this year, where it's like you need a big-time play. Like they were so heavily reliant on going to Trey Palmer deep to find an explosive. That's a guy that I think could really, really make some money for Nebraska. Now, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, as excited as I am for like some of the new guys coming in, like Jeff Sims, I'm extremely excited to see this defense in the 3-3-5 under Tony White. Tony White, in my mind, one of the most underrated defensive-minded coaches in the whole entire country. You look at what he did at Syracuse. He was, again, kind of similar to Matt Rhule. Never a guy that brought in a ton of talent, but he was a guy who schemed up a really, really good defense. And when you talk about that 3-3-5, it's a lot of different fronts you're going to look at. And that's something the Big Ten West is not used to. You see a lot of base defenses, vanilla defenses. This Nebraska team is going to look a lot different on the defense side of the ball. And I'm just excited to see some of these, like, they got some really good football players on the defense side of the ball, lining up in different spots and being able to have a big-time impact on this football game.
And that's the thing. You look at this, like how bad this front seven was last year, at least in terms of the numbers. I mean, they couldn't stop the run at all. But you got the players. I mean, Ty Robinson, he's a pro. Nash Hutmacher, I think, is a really good player. I don't know that he's like a starting NFL.
I love Nash.
He's a great college defensive. He's a tough player. You got Stephen Wynn, who again, just guys who didn't play incredible football, but you feel like it's there. And then just looking at the linebacker, that position I think is going to improve immensely with this new.
That's what I mean. You have a ton of athletes that you're going to see line up all around the field. You take a look at guys like MJ Sherman. He play off-ball linebacker. He'll come off the edge. You obviously have guys, and I want to start here probably. Luke Reimer and Nick Heinrich need to be better. Those are two guys that we were banging the table for last summer heading into 2022, like two All-American level backers who just, the defensive line stunk, and you saw a lot of guards and centers having easy access to those linebackers as a problem with the defensive line. But they weren't great either.
But even those two are stuck in a phone booth. Like they were playing a very tight 4-3 with Isaac Gifford being the guy moving around. Those two are not giant linebackers, but I think they're really good athletes. They're instinctive. Like, why don't you move them around a little bit and let them play a little more free than just sticking them in the middle and again, like getting them caught up in traffic. That's what it felt like all year last year. Like linemen were all over those two. And again, they're not giant players. I don't think that's necessarily how you want them playing. Like, coach to your talent a little more. I think that at the end of the day, that's what I'm kind of looking for. Tony White. I know in an interview he said, we're going to coach to what our guys do. I'm not married to the 3-3-5 exclusively. And if I'm going to drop another D lineman in and play with four,
you're going to see so much, and that's what I'm excited for Tony White. You're going to see 4-man fronts.
They played a 4-3 every time. It was just the same defense, no imagination, and that's what I'm hoping to see with Tony White. That's what good defenses do.
Yeah, and you have the like Chief Borders. Chief Borders, former top 100 dude coming over from Florida. MJ Sherman, former top 50 dude nationally coming out of high school, obviously transferring from Georgia. But those are two guys that you want to see them lining up all over the field and being able to be put in spots where they can be impact players. And one thing I just want to note before we move on to kind of that secondary and taking a look at some of those guys is Isaac Gifford can't be playing nickelback. I think Nebraska was extremely spoiled having a guy like JoJo Doman who is athletic enough to play that hybrid, like that nickel defender, hybrid backer, if you will. Isaac Gifford couldn't do that. He wasn't athletic enough to deal with some of those wide receivers in the slot. He quite frankly wasn't. And I don't think he's a bad football player. I just think he was playing as kind of an example of what we're saying. He's playing out of position. That is not what he is meant to be doing. I'm excited for this 3-3-5 or whatever defensive front you're going to see. You're going to see more speed and you're going to see more athleticism, and you're going to be seeing this front seven be put in different spots where they can kind of impact the game in a more significant way. And that kind of leads us to the back end where, again, I think you got some talent to shake out here.
I mean, Quentin Newsom's a legit really good corner in my mind. Big, physical. I think he runs well with guys. Honestly, I thought the other side, number 0, was the one who he felt like he was giving up some yards last year. I'm blanking on his name, but I thought Quentin Newsom played really well. They gave up a lot of big plays again, things you just don't want to be seeing. But they got the players. I think those two safeties can both play.
Really good. We need to see Buford and Miles Farmer being walked up into the box a little bit because those guys can absolutely lay the wood. And again, this goes back to the theme of putting these guys in spots where they can go hang around the line of scrimmage. That's what Tony, you go back and look at what Syracuse did and how they were so good. Pressure on the quarterback in a lot of different ways. And it wasn't just like, hey, we have an elite edge rusher who's going to go get some pressure. Like, they schemed up some really good blitzes. They had some really distinct coverages as well. Like guys like Garrett Wilson making plays in the back end as well. Or Garrett Williams, I should say. Like, that team was schemed up beautifully, and I'm excited for Tony White to take a more athletic team and more playmaking ability team in this Nebraska defense and kind of do the same thing that they were doing at Syracuse. Still, before we jump on out of here, we talked about some wide receivers. We got to talk a little bit about these tight ends and Thomas Fedone and Eric Gilbert on the offense side of the ball.
I mean, those two are probably the most talented players besides Malachi Coleman on the offensive side.
Fedone, they're coming into an offense that they're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 2 tight end sets, and those are probably your 2 best players on the offense side of the ball, maybe minus Anthony Grant. And I'm really excited to see what they can get out of Eric Gilbert. He was a guy that looked good as a true freshman, obviously was the highest rated tight end recruit ever, according to 24/7 Sports. If they can even get 80% of what his potential is, he's going to be an all Big Ten tight end.
And 100%. I mean, you saw that potential flash at LSU in his first year. You know he can play. He just ended up at Georgia where you got 2 tight ends who are both going pro, and Brock Bowers being probably the best tight end we've seen in the last 15 or so years. So he was like obviously just buried in that depth chart. And again, he's going to get this is kind of his shot now to go pro and do where I think he wants to go. Because at the end of the day, that's a pro athlete. And if he can put together a great season at Nebraska, that'll get him to where he wants to go. And he's got the perfect shot because he should get his chances.
No better offensive coordinator to give such a talented tight end room than Marcus Satterfield. Marcus Satterfield, excuse me. Like, he did a phenomenal job getting those tight ends open and being able to make plays at South Carolina with guys like Austin Stogner and Jaheim Bell. I expect him to do that a lot at Nebraska. Again, that'll do it for the boys. Dill, if we kind of round this out and talk a little bit about what are your expectations? We took a look at the schedule. Like, Wins, losses for Matt Rhule. What do you think is his expectation year one here?
I think you should win 8 games. I think the team's good enough to win 8 games. I think the fact that they're not playing Ohio State or Penn State out of the East this year, like they can beat Michigan State. Michigan's obviously going to be really tough, but I think they should have a shot at everyone in the Big Ten West just because that's not a very strong side of the division.
Yeah, you play Michigan, which is probably a loss, and then you're going on the road to Wisconsin's your next biggest game, and that's winnable. Like that is a winnable team. You look at their schedule, they got some like Illinois is a solid team, Purdue's a solid team, all winnable games. Like this team should be a bowl eligible team, at least 6 wins. That should be
again, Michigan's the only team that would like I'd expect to see like a 14-point dog or something crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a really exciting time to be a Husker fan. Obviously, in our opinion, nailed the head coaching hire with Matt Rhule, probably the best coach available. Again, just want to say thank you to you guys, especially the Cornhusker fans, checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys for real, and we'll talk to y'all later.